So it is March, and that is a very exciting time. It is a very exciting time for social workers because it's Social Workers Month. And there's so many misconceptions about the field that give us an opportunity to share with our colleagues, the general public, about who we are and what we do. And we really want to highlight the silent power of social workers. And so we want to talk a little bit more about what social work, what the field actually is, and what we do, and why we chose to be in the field. But really, we're going to be talking to our social workers who have a more in-depth understanding of how we can sustain ourselves while helping folks through some of the most difficult times of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And before we get into, what it looks like to be a social worker, how we support community, and how we sustain doing this work, I really want to break down like what social work actually is, right? Because a lot of times when we see it on the movies or we hear it in the community, we see social work as one way most of the time. It's like either people are social workers taking babies from homes and doing all of these kinds of things. And that is only like one small part of the work that we do. But essentially what we do is we really support some of the most vulnerable populations with access and tools, resources, strategies, so that they can live sustainable lives, overcome systemic oppression, poverty, those kinds of things. Sometimes we're in therapy, like me and Leticia, we're in therapy rooms supporting people with mental wellness. So it can look all different kinds of ways, right? Yeah.
Sure. And, in a perfect world, we would not need social workers. Folks would take good care of themselves, take good care of others, and have their basic needs met. So the social work field really came about to address what we were seeing in our communities with folks not having access or food or housing, dealing with some wildness, right?
Mm-hmm.
That some folks said, hey, we need to do better by one another. And I believe that's how the field really began to shape. And there's different areas of interest. It's not just one way, but when we think about or say the word vulnerable, I think some people don't even recognize their vulnerability because it's been generational, or it's familiar because my mama and them and everybody else has been in the same circumstance. And so some hardships become normalized when really there's bigger systems at place that have contributed to some people having way less than their basic needs. So it really is meant to be helpful, and we're the helpers.
Yeah, for sure, the helpers. And I love that you pointed out like that systemic piece of it, right? Like in a perfect world, if systems were functioning and there was no inequality, there was equity, then there would really be no need for the work that we do. I kind of joke around like we should be working ourselves out of a job, right? Like that is the goal of it. But we also know historically some systems are they kind of locked in where
rigged.
there's rigged, yes, where there's a lot of work like fighting against kind of like an uphill battle. But a lot of times when you have a social work lens, we're not really looking at just a person, but also like the person inside of a larger system, a larger environment, and how that environment is affecting the individual, right?
Yeah. We, our school of thought looks at the person in their environment, not just the person or just the environment. We look at all these different levels. And so the social work field, although there's quite a few like volunteers, it actually requires trained professionals to be able to assess what's actually going on. And we're able to see the barriers, as most people are, but our job is to like find a way to go over the barrier. And that's by understanding how things work. So it's almost like playing Tetris or Jigsaw, making magic happen at times.
Yes.
The way that we're like trying to find back doors and windows to get folks better access. and also like really empowering people to explore those methods themselves. Because
Yeah.
I'm only one person, right? So there's people who have caseloads of 25 lives that they're trying to help
Yes.
people manage.
Yeah.
I can't do all that, so I have to teach you ways
Mm-hmm.
to get your needs met, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. We're definitely empowering people to, move from survival to thriving, having thriving lives. I love how you said, like, a lot of times, we're looking for the back doors or we're trying to make magic happen. And it's so interesting because in my personal life, I'm like, why are we taking no for an answer the first time? Like, I get so
Oh
confused.
yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
okay. But,
I know.
and I realized that was because that was how I was trained, right? Being in this profession, it's like we are the advocates,
Yeah.
right? You can say no one time, but we're not accepting that no. It's because there's an answer. There has to be. We have to just look for it.
Yes. It
Right.
drives my husband wild. I'm like, so you didn't ask any more questions?
Exactly. Like, I'm curious. Like, you didn't get curious. Like,
Yeah.
you didn't problem solve. You didn't ask to be someone else. That's our role, the advocates, the problem solvers. We get really creative on how to get needs met, how to connect people to resources, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Definitely making magic happen.
So why did you choose the field?
I chose the field, specifically social work, because as we know in the mental health field, there's a lot of different roads you could take, right? We could do marriage and family therapy. We could do psychology. We could do psychiatry. I think in other states there's the LPCC. I might be saying that wrong. Something like that. There's so many different helping professions under the mental health umbrella. But the reason why I chose social work is a lot of what we've already been talking about, like the person in the environment. Growing up in Richmond, California, that's what it was, right? Like the environment, just seeing people exposed to different kinds of traumas, exposed to different kinds of systemic oppressions, exposed to these things where once I got in the field and I learned more about social work, I'm like, this ain't all them.
No.
Right? This is not all this person. It's not because, their brain is not functioning correctly or their nervous system is dysregulated. Some of that is true, right? And we teach that, but also we have to look at all of the different layers so that we're not pathologizing broken systems or people based on broken systems, right? So I really like the shared accountability and responsibility that social work brings to the table. Whereas it helps the person to feel more humanized, right? Like, okay, these are the things that I'm up against. Oh, it's not me. Oh, I'm navigating a really broken system.
Yeah, or it's not only me. There's some other,
Yeah. Oh, I was born into a traumatic household, right? Like those kinds of things we look at and just help the person to see themselves outside of themselves and inside of the environment as well. What about you?
Well, I shared with you before, I was actually trying to avoid the social work field because of my own bias around what social workers do. I knew very early on I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I said that in another podcast. There's some prestige towards it. And then there is some hierarchy kind of in the field around your designation, what route you chose. I don't hold that anymore, but when I was younger, social workers were doing the grunt work. I've had family members who had social workers, and I was like, I want nothing to do with that. That seems like too much. It's, sad, it's difficult, it's hard. So I was really on a psychology track. And after undergrad, I took a year to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I still wanted psychology, but I didn't know there were so many different routes. Like you said, different routes to become a therapist. And looking at all the options, it was all pointing to social work. That gave me, I didn't know if I was like, what if I become a psychologist and I don't like it? Social work gave the most flexibility to be whatever I wanted to be,
Yeah.
to be able to morph and grow and become a therapist. So I like having options, and social work provided it has provided for me options to move about different systems as my interests change and grow. I can be in public policy, I can be in healthcare, I can be in mental health, and it is more representative of like who I am as a person and how I want to show up. And the offerings around our learning really piqued my interest. Oh, there's other things going on. I didn't know that. I learned so much, and it helped me to be more compassionate towards even my own family, friends or people I grew up with around. Oh, that's why. That's the reason why. Us both growing up in Richmond, I was like, we didn't have a grocery store. There's like one. You had to go to El Cerrito to go to the grocery store. And I frequently talk to others about like what I ate, like canned green beans, corn, right? Corn, using lard to fry chicken. I was like, because we just couldn't, it wasn't accessible.
Right.
And what does that do for your health when you're eating fruit cocktail, and for fruit that's all up in that syrup? And then also like the high rates of cancer, breast cancer, learning about environmental injustice. That's what social work allowed me to see. Oh, it's deeper than how come all this bad stuff is happening to people I know, I love, I care about. And it wasn't just me, it was my friends and their families. So it was really normalized to have this kind of shared hardship. And it wasn't till, studying that I was like, that's actually by design a little bit.
Yeah. And it kind of debunks that myth of like picking yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Like you just got to do it all yourself. Like social work teaches us that that's not the reality. And it's not even possible, right? When you have, like you said, broken systems, or being in community where you don't even have access to nutritious foods.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have a vehicle to go to El Cerrito, because depending on what part of Richmond you live in, that's a trip on public transportation, especially back in the day when Uber wasn't available.
Oh yeah, I was taking 2 buses to go to school every single day.
Exactly.
And God forbid you wake up late because you stayed up late and because you're in a wreck because of some shooting or something you heard about. The barriers just to get to school, I didn't think about it. I know it now, but social work has allowed me to see the different ways that people are showing up under great hardship, And we're judging people. Oh, look at them. They're just doing this and that.
Right.
That's
there's
not
layers. No, there's layers. And it really just helps me to just value and like highlight the importance of social work, right? Because from another lens, it could be, well, what are you doing? You just need to get up earlier, or you just need to do this and you just need to do that, without acknowledging all of the different factors that play a role in just trying to get to school on time.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get to school, or I'm just speaking in general, you get to school, you frustrated, you might have an attitude because you've been on 2 buses, don't know what you've seen on the buses. And now the teacher wants you to focus and try to learn. It's like, I've already done a lot of focusing and trying to create awareness, especially growing up in Richmond, right? Like hypervigilance is real. Like we almost too focused. And now you want me to focus on like learning all of these things. When, you think about it from a social work lens, it really helps support the person in the environment. Okay, how can we support you? Yeah, what do you need? What resources can we put in place? How can we communicate to the teacher, like what, some things that can support you, maybe not sharing all of your business, but what kind of team can we create around you to have better support, right? So,
and that definitely happened for me in my life of being a part of AVID, a program in high school. I don't even know. I think someone referred me to that program, but it was super helpful. And then a teacher compassionately saying, I think you should do this thing. And I was like, I can't, I don't have a ride. And him offering to give me a ride. And I was
Yes.
so nervous for him